everyone to this evening's session on May 4 of the Grand Haven Board of Light and Power. We will start off with a call to order and ask Renee to do that now.
Okay, Director Crum.
Here, Grand Haven.
Director Keefe.
Here.
Director Nasser.
Here.
Director Witherow.
Here.
Chairperson Smant.
Yes. Here. Okay, we are all present. Next item is the meeting agenda. Any changes, additions from the one that we most recently received? None. Okay.
No, the only just as we were talking about before the meeting, there is a closed session on item 8. So I believe you have a motion, and that's to discuss negotiation sessions with our union. Right. So that we'll do that after we get done with our work.
Okay. Yes. I'm assuming you're not going to deal with the minutes of the meeting. We have them if you wish to do it. If not,
we included them so that you could look at them if you wanted to, but we aren't anticipating any action items for tonight's meeting.
Okay. Okay, so the next item is the approval of the meeting agenda as presented and discussed. Support? Support. Comments or questions? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We now have the public comment period open.
If anyone on the Zoom meeting would like to participate, please raise your hand and I'll ask you to unmute. And by raise your hand, I mean use the Zoom feature of raising your hand.
Seeing no hands raised or comments made, we'll move on to item number 4 in the agenda. Updated staff review on CHP economic benefits, and Eric, I believe you'll be doing that.
Let me just kick this one off a little bit, and then we'll turn it over to Eric. For these items, all these items were included in your packet at the last meeting. Some of them, they don't require any action other than to just understand the economics associated with it, because there were economics associated with all of these items that included either in this year's budget or all future budgets. So some of these items, particularly the first one, I thought it was appropriate that we have been zeroing in on the economics of the CHP a bit more. And I asked Eric to go over for the board some examples of how we're evaluating the economics of this plant. Not so much for this year's budget, because obviously the plant won't be included in it, but some of these items actually will impact this year's budget. So these high cost, we do not have a call option in our portfolio at this point in time. So it did, and I think for those of you that didn't see that, we did an analysis in February of 240 hours during the quote Texas energy crisis that amounted to cost us about $200,000 that we would have saved if we would have had the CHP online. So
You used $42 on that calculation?
Yes, we did. So we used $42 and then used the actual cost. And as Eric's looking at this, I mean, what we're using going forward is about a $75 per hour cost during these peak hours. In February is actually over 100 for those 200 and some hours. So that's why it ballooned up relatively quickly. But I think what we're seeing is, and the idea here is to understand the economics associated with it, not so much to talk about the specific numbers and that sort of thing, but to talk about the 3 areas where this particular plant does make sense and why we're recommending we move forward. Since we don't have the plant online for the next year's budget, we will have to assume some cost ramifications of these three items in excess of what we would do if the plant was there. So that's the purpose of the analysis, more so to just kind of understand the economics associated with, and Erik can explain a little bit better what he particularly did. But I think what was telling was the 10-year look back on when on when our costs would have been above a certain level had we not had SIMS. And that's what's really the economics associated with this, is as we don't have anything right now, there will be these time periods, and we're estimating, about 500 hours a year conservatively. But you see in some of those years that there was a substantial element. I mean, I think one year it was 1,400 hours or something like that, and Erik can go over them. But there are these peak times where the cost can be very, very substantial. And what we envision, and this is as we bring on more and more renewable as an entity, as a region, we believe that these short-term peaks will actually increase, not decrease. And batteries will solve some of it, but not all of it. And that's why you're seeing a lot of these plants come online. And we saw it just a few weeks ago. We saw $3,500 in 1 hour just popped up, and it was because of the wind was all there's a storm coming across. The wind was all at maximum, came through, dumped like crazy, and MISO couldn't bring on costs high enough. And we saw, even though most of it was out in Iowa, we saw $3,500 an hour for 2 hours or something like that, real quick. So those are the types of things that we're talking about doing. So with that, I just want to spend 10 minutes, maybe Erik, if you can kind of walk through your analysis that you did, and then we can answer some questions. But the idea is not so much that we used the analysis for the CHP in this year's budget, but what we did have to do in this year and past, and for actually this year and the next 2 years, is we don't have any way to mitigate those peak hour costs at this point in time. None, zero. So we have to assume that we're going to pay them. So those are really where we think you can see your costs increase very substantially in just a few hours a year. So with that, I'd like to, Erik, I'll let you talk.
When you go back to the PEC evaluation and you look at how we made that justification, it was on capacity only. We inflated the cost of energy and took that out of the equation for the prime mover evaluation. And the reason we did that is we wanted to make sure that this resource could be justified on capacity. And I don't know if you guys remember me saying it, but we wanted energy and the benefits of snowmelt to be icing on the cake, just added. Well, this report here was to find out just how much of a benefit that icing on the cake would be. And it actually is substantial. I still believe we did the right thing by looking at this as a capacity only resource in the prime mover evaluation for the PEC report, because if it doesn't pass that, you've got to take a harder look. Well, it passed it, so we move forward with it. Now this quantifies what kind of benefit this resource will have from an energy perspective and from a coupled snowmelt perspective, which I think is what you and the council were hoping for when you guys set your original resolutions, is can we couple this in a way that it has substantial savings for snowmelt? So from our perspective, we have to start with the electric side. So let's start there now. Let's look at what the benefit is on the energy portion of this resource. And we did go back a couple years when we started this, and we saw some substantial savings, but it was really telling when we went back the last 10 years. That's 8,760 hours a year times 10. So we looked at every single hour over the past 10 years, and that's your metered data, by the way. So that's not some theoretical number. You have those records. You download them, or I should say I download them every year. Usually we download them every month just to look back at the last month. But we ended up going back and doing a price distribution curve for every year for the last decade. And it is substantial. And that was kind of interesting in a way, because if you look at the chart and you start looking at how you would dispatch this thing, and this is what our operators are going to have to do eventually anyway. So it's a good exercise for us to go through and share it with them, because this is what they'll be doing on a nightly and daily basis. And you start looking at the hours in the year above your set point, and we just called our set point $42 a megawatt hour to run this unit. And actually I did bump the cost of the unit up to 44 to 45 just to see if I had a substantial drop, but it really didn't make much of a difference, which is good. That shows you that this unit has a real opportunity to be in the money from an energy standpoint. So if you look back at, and it varies drastically, like 2014 was a very odd year. We would have dispatched these assets 2,307 hours, and your differential would have been about $1 million on just energy. This has got nothing to do with capacity. This is just straight megawatt hours. That's really impressive. Now, in our analysis, at least, though, we took that year out. We said, you know what, that might have been an anomaly. We don't know. We can't guarantee on a year like that going forward. And so we took that really high year of $1 million out of the equation. And then last year was an artificially low year with COVID. We took that year out, but that was only 154. It really didn't change it much. And so the net benefit over a decade, if we take that high year out, would have been about $2.4 million on just the call option. Now remember, this is historical data. Now go back to what I said just a couple minutes ago. What's really interesting about this is that's $2.48 million with an electric generation fleet that is largely base load generation, meaning they're on most of the time. You see drop-offs in the spring and fall when people start taking their outages. But how is this going to change when we move into an intermittent world where most of our generation is intermittent? We can't guarantee it. We don't know what it'll be. Depends on what the weather is, right? Depends on when the sun is shining and the wind is blowing. Batteries will have a place, but how long will that place last? Texas was 10 days. Batteries last 4 hours. What do you do? What's the solution? These peaking assets are going to have a more important role as we start moving down that larger renewable world. This 10-year look back is based off of a baseload world. So I think there is a much greater opportunity than what you're seeing in this chart, but let's go off the historical data that more than justifies what we're doing from an energy perspective. So, I mean, when you look at these three benefits, that's the energy side. And I know we're always a little hesitant to talk about the benefits to snowmelt because I don't want people to construe that we're doing this for snowmelt, because we're not. We'll never justify an energy project to help snowmelt. But take yourself back to 2018 when you guys set your resolution that you wanted a coupled system. It was because the snowmelt customers were coming to you saying, hey, look, this closing Sims puts us in a really difficult spot. Don't abandon us. And so you directed us to come up with a solution if we could. And that's what we told the customers too, right? We told the snowmelt customers, if we can develop an energy solution that makes sense and we can justify it to our ratepayers, then we'll look at a coupled system and see what the co-benefits are to you. And that's pretty substantial as well. And that's what the third section is. And the way that Progressive AE designed the facility was really creative. They took the 5 boilers that we purchased for the interim snowmelt solution, and they made those have value to us in heating the facility. That was sharp on their part, because that not only allowed us to help them with their annual expenses, the snowmelt system's annual expenses, that helped us with the capital expenses to snowmelt as well. So think of it from this perspective. They spent $1 million, we spent $1 million, put snowmelt boilers in. And we could have built our facility and put together a whole new heating system independent of that. But rather than do that, let's take advantage of that investment that's already made and see if we can creatively utilize it to where if we're going to spend the money on our own heating system anyways, let's see if we can help them with the capital cost. And that was pretty substantial. Now, interesting enough, what we wanted to know is, can we offset running a unit instead of buying a 5x16 block of power? And so MPPA did what we told them to do, go out and get us prices this winter for a 5x16 block of power. And we want to compare that cost against the cost of dispatching one engine to offset the idle mode. That was where the savings was in snow melt with Sims, right? You were taking waste heat from the condenser during idle mode, and then you had to add heat from the DA when you went into melting mode, which means you had to charge them when you melted. We don't have a situation like that with Sims gone, but there actually is a situation where we can reduce the annual operating expenses by offsetting a 5x16 block of power. I was a little bit surprised by this, and those savings are pretty substantial too. So this project, from a technical economic perspective, it makes all the sense in the world. I think where we're going with this is it's going to be a policy decision at the board level. Economically, this makes sense. We can justify this. This is a doable, good project. It doesn't meet the exact intent of the resolutions that you guys unanimously set and the council did, but I think it hits the intent of what you were looking for and desiring when you wanted some local control, some local generation, something that's coupled with snow melt. We like it. It's a good solution. This is worth doing. But I'm certainly happy to answer any questions you have with the report.
I've got a couple.
Okay, go ahead, Larry.
The tables, you and I discussed this last Friday, and you didn't go over the tables for everybody here, but what's worth noting is that the set point at $42, it includes the gas expense, but what it doesn't include is operations, management, and the interest on the principal.
Covers
Because
variable, but not fixed.
It's not free and clear until after 20 years. If you did all the calculations, and I see both these tables, the bottom one should have probably been divided by 8 instead of 10, but not to nitpick. But did you do a dollar per kilowatt month calculation on these? That's what PEC did.
That's the capacity.
Yeah, but this is energy. This isn't
And
capacity.
PEC did that calculation on 5 units.
Yes,
And their first number was $5.16, right?
you're talking capacity, not energy, but yes.
Okay. So if you can't exceed that, what does that say for efficiency, or what does it say for revenues coming back into profitability for the Board of Light and Power? Because they moved from $5.16 to $6, and they have both the power purchase option and the self-generation option. When it gets to $6, there's $2 million on the plus side. If you do the calculations on your tables on here, you get about $2.50 per kilowatt a month on your first table, and on the second one, it's $2.
Are we,
I think,
I'm not quite done here.
okay, but I think we're confused. We're confusing apples to oranges.
I'm not done yet.
Okay, but you're confusing, so I think what we
I'm
need to
not
do is
done
put
yet,
it all
Dave.
together.
Okay, you can speak up
Okay.
afterwards, okay? The $42, you speak of, you didn't want to raise it up to 44 or 46.
No, I did.
Right?
I did raise it.
You did.
It didn't make-
Did you take it up to 50?
Why would I take it up to 50?
Because if you added in the interest costs and your operation costs, it's going to go up.
Larry, you don't put in fixed expenses for dispatching. You never did that
I
at
said
Sims.
operations.
Yes, and I did. I put in variable O&M expenses.
That isn't what you said.
No, that is what I said. There's fuel and variable O&M.
You said you higher conservative value of gas prices. You did not say
There
anything about
is-
the option.
I am telling you right now, there is gas and variable O&M expenses in that
Is that what you
$42.
said last Friday?
Larry, it is what
I
I
don't-
said. You told me I had to add in labor expenses, and I'm telling you, those are fixed costs. You didn't, just like Sims, this is no different than 40 years worth of operating Sims. You did not put in fixed O&M in your dispatching analysis, but it was a base load unit as well.
But
This is a
doesn't
peaking
doesn't
unit.
PEC do it?
PC took energy out of the equation. They wanted it to see if it would pass the test on capacity only.
What does self-generation column stand for then?
So you got to read the PEC report,
Yeah.
and I will put it, they put the cost to generate at $50 a megawatt hour because they wanted to take energy out of the equation. They didn't want dispatching to impact their analysis. It was a straight capacity analysis. Yes, they wanted to see if the thing met market conditions on just capacity. And keep in mind, in the PEC report, they used a 4% cost of capital, and you're at what, 2% on the bonds is what we're seeing?
Well, that's
And a
not-
30-year bond
that's not
with a
the right
15% contingency.
But that doesn't work to our advantage on the numbers that we have.
That works completely to your advantage.
Why?
Because you're seeing a lower cost
You're
of
using
capital.
less.
You're seeing a lower cost of capital. You're seeing a 20-year bond, not a
Right.
30-year, and you're not hitting 15% contingency. So we bid out the engines. That's a good point. Let's talk about that real quick.
Yeah.
So
So you're telling me at 2.5 million,
let's go into,
in the end,
let's talk about the PEC report real quick. Let's stay on target. In the PEC report,
yeah,
they estimated your equipment procurement at $7.8 million plus a 15% contingency for $1.2 million. That's a total of $9 million. In December, we bid this project out for equipment procurement. We got 3 bids back, all good bids. They were all pretty tight. The lowest bid was firm, 7.1 versus 9. So you've got a lot of conservativeness in the PEC report. And what we're seeing is this project is coming in better than what was anticipated in this PEC report, because they use very conservative numbers, which is what we want them to do, right? We want to come in under what PEC tells
well,
us.
I guess what the question really is if you're not gonna add in all the costs of the facility, anything looks good. Otherwise, you're not covering any of the expense. You're not even covering the interest expense.
Okay,
I mean, you can quote all this.
Can we put the chart up there? The chart with the 20-year fuel costs? Or no, on Erik's report. Yeah, go down. Yes. This is
Which one? Which one you on?
in your packet, this chart that looks like this,
The annual power supply?
annual power supply costs.
All right,
Okay, this includes all costs.
okay.
Every cost, transmission, energy, on-peak, off-peak, all of the annual costs.
Okay,
The red line is without CHP. So you can do this, and MPPA does this stochastically with hundreds of different analysis. The red line is one potential outcome of all of these costs, all right? Now, every single outcome, and MPPA does this on multiple different high gas costs, low gas costs, high capacity costs, low capacity costs. This red line is what we would consider the most probable case over the next 20 years.
and how does that line get calculated?
Okay, we look at the forward price curves. Of course, this is 100% purchase now. The red line is
Right.
100% purchases. So you're purchasing all of your capacity, all of your energy,
Right,
all of your renewable energy credits at an increasing level of renewable purchases to 28% in 2025, I think it is, and then 2% per year after that. So you're up in the 40+% range in the early 30s, and you're increasing into the marketplace, into the renewable marketplace that most people see Michigan in between 2030 and 2040. So that red line is what we anticipate to be a 100% cost. Now, could it be higher? Could it be lower? Yes. When you actually do that, what you do is put a cone of uncertainty around that. What's not hedged, you would actually show an uncertainty level above and below that curve. All right? Now, the blue line takes out 12.5 megawatts out of the capacity purchase and inserts what is the probable amount of energy during these peak periods of time from the unit. Only those two things. Takes out the capacity, puts in the capacity at $1.125 million per year which is our anticipated debt service for the $18.5 million plan.
The cost of capacity is how much?
$1.125 million per year, which is the debt service for the plant, the CHP plant, at 2% interest.
Okay,
So we took out the capacity component, put in the actual debt service,
okay,
interest and annual principal payments over 20 years.
right.
Then we dispatched the unit hourly. In year one, we assumed 500 hours at an average cost of $75. All right, which is well below the number that that Eric estimated. 500 hours at $75. That's the first year in year 2023 on that chart.
That's what year? The first year? What do you-
2024, planning year 2024, right? And then every year thereafter, we assumed a slight growth in those numbers, in the 500 number, in the $75 per megawatt hour of use, and the inflation of the variable operating costs on the unit. All right, so we made reasonable estimates, and the blue line is the estimated cost of the entire portfolio, taking out 12.5 megawatts of purchased capacity, inserting the debt service on 12.5 megawatts, and the operating of the call option. All right, now the difficult thing is what you're talking about with just capacity is when we go out and buy zonal resource credits, the capacity, we do not get a call option. We do not get it. So we pay for the capacity.
Well, if it's cheaper, you don't worry about it.
Well, no, you don't not worry about it. You don't get it.
Why don't you get it?
You do not get an energy call
Well, I
option
understand that.
with capacity. In this
But you could
particular,
buy your capacity.
you buy your capacity, and if you want a call option, you'd pay extra for it.
Right.
All right. So we can also price the call option. We can go out to a party and ask for a call option at $42 a megawatt hour, at $45 a megawatt hour, at $50 a megawatt hour, and ask for a price. I can assure you that the price is going to be consistent with what Eric said it was going to be, because that's what somebody's going to do, is they're going to look at the historical period of time and they're going to say, how much that is? What's the risk I'm taking? They will hedge it, increase their profit, and sell it to you for more than what our energy call option is associated with this unit. Else they wouldn't sell it.
Yeah.
Right? Cool. So that's the assumption. Now, those you might say, well, geez, those lines are pretty close together. Absolutely, they're pretty close together.
Mm-hmm.
And this shows you the perspective that we need to start talking about in this community.
Yeah.
All right? Because let me finish. The red line over 20 years is $495 million. All right? $495 million over 20 years. That is our estimated by all purchase power costs. So when people say, well, the $18 million, that's such a huge investment. No, you actually save $5 million, only $5, but that's a lot of money, $5 million in 20 years. That blue line and the red line are separated by $5 million a year. Now, what happens at year 21 is you see that little blue line jogs there. That's when your debt service goes away. So now you're getting the call option for nothing. And then the cost of that differential between there, if you go 3 more years, because the first 2 years on this chart, we don't use because the plant's not there. The last 3, if you assume 3 more years or a 25-year evaluation period, that $5 million savings goes up to $13 million savings because you're not paying debt service on it anymore. Makes sense, right? And if you can get the unit to run, let's say, most people are saying, well, this thing is going to be stranded after 20 years. Well, what happens if it runs to 25 or 27? Suddenly that $5 million goes up really quickly because you can see the differences in those lines go apart really quickly.
Now,
Now,
it does have all to do with what the capacity costs are from the MPPA, right?
the forward price curves for capacity,
Yeah, so the actual cost at the time.
right?
So we're projecting it based on the Cone discussion.
No, we're not projecting anything.
Okay, all right.
See, the difference between what MPPA does and what PEC does is MPPA only projects the forward price curve based on actual bid out data. So they know what
How
we just,
far out?
well, as far as we can go. So we have bought capacity out 15 years. So we have,
Are there other companies going out 30 years?
no, because you can only get what people are willing to provide you. Now, that's the problem with what happens after. That's why we bought the capacity that we bought a couple of years, last
Right,
month,
I understand.
because there's not a lot of people that are selling it out there. All right. So what MPPA is saying is they looked at their forward price curves. They looked at where they were available to get capacity, and understand that when you buy a renewable purchase for 20 years, you get some capacity with that, a reduced amount. But once these plants retire, the amount of capacity is almost going to be entirely in batteries. All right. So, and me and Eric did talk to some people about battery capacity. Battery capacity is starting to become something that you compare. You get zonal resource credits for the battery capacity, and you can start buying batteries. And MPPA is trying to look at some of the cost associated with capacity going out. But we feel that those capacity prices at the levels that we're talking about, we might be paying a little bit more, but that $5 million assumes a high payment on our behalf for our capacity with a relatively low side on the capacity. So we're actually losing money on the assumed capacity payment in this analysis, and we're making it up on the energy side. And that's how the $5 million is getting in there.
Okay. All right. When you start saying all the energy to buy is going to start disappearing, are you talking 2040? Are you talking 2050?
What we're talking about is those. What we're talking about is those peak hours. All right. So we're going out and buying very reasonably priced renewables right now. So for all the people that are on the phone that say immediately, Dave Walters is saying that that energy is going to dry up. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying is that when you buy capacity and energy in the form of a long-term renewable energy contract, right? You're going to get some capacity with that. You're going to get some energy with that, and you're going to get some renewable energy credits with that. All right. You're going to take that energy whenever it's available, right? You're never going to shut it off. When the sun's shining, the wind's blowing, except when you're charging batteries, you're going to be taking all of the energy from those units. Yeah. All right.
So how long will the batteries service a demand factor? I mean, you said all the production of energy is disappearing.
That's not what I said, Larry. That is not what I said.
I'm talking gas fired. You mentioned that before.
I said yes. They're
disappearing.
The amount of energy from baseload units,
right,
as they retire, the amount of energy is being replaced with renewable energy.
Clean renewables, right.
Which is competitive, all right?
I understand.
It's very competitive, and we're recommending we buy more and more of it.
So the question was, when are they going to start disappearing? 2040?
When is the capacity going to start?
No, the energy. The baseload plants.
Yeah, you can look at the retirements that we have online. You can see almost all of the coal plants are going to be gone by 2030. Almost all of them. 2030, yeah. And you're seeing, DTE, Consumers Energy, they're announcing large plant closures and retirements, and we can see those.
So as these plants close, you're saying that renewables are going to replace that energy?
Yes.
Okay, and they'll be able to do that in the state?
Yeah, and they will replace the majority of it. The problem is again, getting energy when the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing. All right.
I understand that.
So that's what these peaking resources and batteries will fill that void. Now, the problem with batteries is they work great for 4 hours on a daily basis.
Well, that was where I was going with it. So then what do you do after 4 hours?
That's why we're saying is that batteries will play a valuable portion of this balancing that has to be done. Balancing daily is a thing that batteries do very well. All right. 4 hours, transferring 4 hours from the daytime to 4 hours at nighttime. All right.
Yeah, but you need these large gangs of batteries,
And-
should have
and-
seen the transmission lines or something.
And that's what I'm saying is those are being constructed and they are becoming very economical, all right, in very limited purposes, all right? So we are evaluating these transactions. When they make sense to do it, we will be coming and recommending buying batteries for both capacity and for some sort of energy storage, because you can price them separately. You can either just get the capacity or the capacity and the energy out of the batteries. Now, the problem with batteries is this longer term storage, and particularly in Michigan, is storing solar energy in the summertime to use in the wintertime when the sun isn't shining, all right? And you're talking a significant amount of solar energy. Now, wind does blend with that, and it's higher in the wintertime, right? So the combination of wind and solar makes some sense. It's good. The problem is there are 0 wind energy projects being approved in Michigan now, all right? They stopped building them.
Yeah, well, it's
So-
not likely they're gonna start again.
So
either.
everything is going to solar. We are recommending substantial solar purchases because these are very cost-effective projects. The problem is that actually when you start putting all of this renewable energy on the grid, and that's why I'm encouraging you to listen to John Baer this week, because he will tell you the exact same thing that I'm telling you, is when you bring on these significant amounts of renewable, like they're doing in Iowa. This doesn't take, or like they're doing in.
They're at 50% right now.
Right, and what you're seeing is there is still a need for fueled resources. And what's actually happening is the peaking resources, newer peaking resources, are replacing the baseload units, which is exactly what you'd expect to happen. As baseload units go away, the need for a resource to start and stop and fill the holes created in this intermittent world actually goes up.
Yeah.
So that's what we're saying is, and that's what actually people have been telling us for the last 3 or 4 years, that as we make this transition, no one's suggesting it's not going to happen. No one's suggesting that we aren't going to participate in this marketplace, that this unit is replacing these units, these peaking units will not replace. Now, listen to what I'm saying here. These peaking units will not replace 1 kilowatt hour of renewable energy. Because if there's adequate renewable energy there, they will not run. So this idea out there that we are putting in a gas-fired unit and the gas-fired unit is going to run and displace renewable energy is not understanding the situation that we're in, because it won't run. And if it doesn't run and all of the other resources come online and solar and wind and everything are doing exactly what people think they were going to be, and we don't have these peak hours that we need to run it on, you know what? Your call option doesn't get exercised.
Yeah.
And your actual costs are lower than the blue line. All right. So that's what we're doing here, is we are getting a call option to protect us against high costs. If the high costs don't exist, it's like a life insurance policy. You don't run around town going, man, I didn't get that life insurance payment. No,
Yeah.
If you don't call on the call option, that means that your prices are low and you didn't need to exercise that, which means that we are not at the red line. We're not at the blue line. We're below that line. And the idea behind a call option is that you pay some money. It anticipated by most people that it will pay off. But if what these people are saying is true, and that renewable energy will make all the sense in the world and it will fill voids and we'll get batteries and we won't ever need to run this unit, you know what? Great. Because then we won't ever exercise the call option and our price will be even lower than what we're projecting. So
I understand that.
that's the analysis behind this. All right. But what most people are saying is at least in the next 20 years. And that's why we backed the debt service from 20, we were looking at 25 years. We backed it to 20 because we wanted to be the most conservative possible and say, okay, most people are saying, you know what, we aren't going to be at 95% renewable till close to 2050. If we get to it by 2050, all right? And we will be using these peaking resources at least in the 5 to 10% range for many, many, many years into the future, all right? So what we're assuming in this particular instance is very small hours that it runs. We're only running it during these periods of time where the wind's not blowing and the sun's not shining and batteries aren't making it up. Because if those things all come through, you know what? Our unit won't run. The only time these units are going to run is when the cost exceed the cost of running our units. Then we'll start them up. If the cost never exceeds the cost to run them, we won't start them up and we'll buy from the alternative resources, which if they happen to be our contracted renewable resources, we take from them anyway, right? So that's the economics associated with this. Now, that is if we decide to do it in 2024, fiscal year 2024, all right? So in our 6-year plan, we're looking at 2024 as the year where this unit would be operational. Before that, before 2024, so in fiscal year 2022 and 2023, we have to assume that we do not have a call option and that we are subject to this peaking resource and having to go out and buy that. So we have included that and the other thing is, what is the right size? All right. So what is the right size? That's the last thing that we really didn't talk about is the right size is what is the size for a call option that you would need? Well, you need a call option for your unhedged energy. All right. So you don't need a call option if you've hedged, right? Because you're getting a fixed cost price. You get that? Understand?
Yep.
So you get, if you go out and buy the hedge, you don't need the call option. We are typically about 80% hedged, right? So the 20% unhedged is where we're accessing this market. Hopefully the costs are lower, but we're subjecting ourselves during those hours to these peaks, right? So what is 20% of 36 megawatts or 35 megawatts approximately? It's about seven megawatts or so. And if you look at these 500 hours that we looked at, the average load during those 500 hours is 42 megawatts. So if we didn't hedge 80% or 20% of that 40 megawatts, that 12 and a half megawatts looks really nice. It looks like it's about right where we need. Because if you go much higher than that, you know what? You don't need it because you're hedged.
Right.
So
So how do you make that decision, whether you're at 80% or more than that?
that's based on our hedge plan that we have with MPPA, and they recommend that we not go no lower than 75 to 80%. Now,
How high would they go?
well, that depends on if you have like Zealand, for instance, has 36 megawatts of peaking capacity.
Right.
Now they can go into that unhedged position a little bit more than we do because they have that 36 megawatts that they can call upon and when it's unhedged. If we only have 12 and a half megawatts, to call upon, then MPPA is going to recommend that we don't expose ourselves to that significant amount above that. Does that make sense?
I understand.
Okay, so there's the economics. I don't think I want to go any more into that,
Yeah.
but I think, that's the problem so what we're looking at in the next 2 years is an unhedged position, right? So in an unhedged position, this is what UFS was talking about last week is when you have an unhedged position, typically you want to have a bit more cash on hand to get you through these periods because you will experience these high cost weeks, high cost months in almost every year out there. So
How much energy is coming over transmission lines outside the state of Michigan to service Michigan?
Okay, so that's a whole different thing.
I understand.
Yeah.
But that's a cost factor.
Right.
in all this.
What they did do, see, if you remember last year, I came and I said this capacity prices zoomed up to what was called cone last year. Well, what they did this year is they actually allowed more import capability on the transmission system. So we could buy capacity from the adjacent zone. All right, so what happened then is the capacity prices tanked again, all right? Because the people that are in that short-term market, they looked at that import-export capability that was opened up, and they allowed more capacity to come in, so it dropped the price down again.
So how much, when we get outside the state of Michigan, economically speaking, how much could we access in terms of energy availability?
Short or long-term?
Long term.
Not very much, because everybody's in the same boat. Everybody's retiring all these plants, and they're building very few peaking plants. And there's this amount of purchase capacity is going to go down, and eventually what's going to happen is the price will shoot up, and then they will install units at cone, which is a simple cycle, peaking unit. So
I guess the summary statement is it takes you about 20 years to put yourself in a position where you can get a positive cash flow out of the thing, right?
well, you have to assume a duration, yeah. And if in this particular instance, over 20 years, you get a positive, you get $5 million of savings over 20 years. Now, is that adequate? Is that for an 18?
Compared to what you're writing checks for, I mean, it's a personal thing, how anybody looks at it.
And that's what I'm saying.
I'm not going to argue it. I'm just saying.
I think what we need to do is we need to look at that 495 million.
Yeah.
And is it worth to have, because the biggest exposure that you have in that 495 million is your unhedged position.
Yeah.
All right. So do you want to hedge? If you're at 80%, that's 20% of that $495 million is unhedged. That's a lot of money. All right.
Yeah.
So what you want to do is you want to decrease around that line. You want to decrease that cone of uncertainty. I always kind of liken it to the hurricane path. I mean, you've got that cone of uncertainty around the hurricane path. Yeah. If you can tighten it up, that's what having a call option does for it. It tightens up that estimate so that instead of having, this 20% unhedged, you've got at least a cap on the unhedged portion.
Are you of a mind that if that cone tightens up based on the availability of capacity, you buy it?
Well, that's why we went out through 2028. All right.
Yeah, but I mean, would you buy it? I mean, even if it's out there 30 years?
We have capacity now based on that chart that I have through 2035. So we know the capacity of that cost.
So you're out 15.
Yeah.
Would you go 30? If you could buy it right?
I don't think most people are.
I know, but would you?
We had a tough time getting people to commit to 15 years, given the fact that there's only a few.
For them to sell it, you mean?
Yeah, because there's only a few plants out there, and they're taking the risk that plant's going to be retired, and then they have to basically build a new plant and give it to you at that level. So let's move on. Again, that's the economics associated with it. I think it was important. It's a good discussion to have. That's what a work study is for, is to talk about that. I'm glad we went through that. The cost estimates for the SIMS environmental remediation is the next thing. This is the next big unknown that we're looking at, and it's the biggest change that you've seen in your capital improvement budget from last year to this year. All right. And it actually happened in the last month. We actually increased the $8 million estimate for remediation on the SIM site to 17.8 million.
17?
17. So almost $10 million. All right. $8 million to $17.8 million. And if you look at our capital improvement plan last year to our capital improvement plan this year, it is almost 100% in that change in the site remediation of Harbor Island.
Jeez.
And let me tell you where this goes, what we did to get this, all right? If you remember, we are not in agreement with Eagle on what we needed to do, all right? And we've been somewhat getting beat up by people saying, why aren't you just doing what Eagle told us you should do? So that is what Eagle told us to do. All right. So
what are they telling you to do?
It's there was 2 or 3 options that they gave us, and they enlarged, and it's only for the coal ash portion of the problem. All right. So the coal ash portion of the problem gets you to just the impoundments, right?
The ash.
Okay, I'm sorry. That's the impoundment portion of the ash. The ash that's in the regulated impoundments, all right? We have addressed those issues. We addressed the coal yard problems, the wetlands mitigation problems, and then we also put some money in there for some solidification, correct? Now, what we didn't do is there is no money in that $17.8 million other than what we can handle if we address this collectively with the coal ash and the trash together. We may be able to address some of the trash in using that $17.8 million. But what Eagle is telling us is they will tell us, essentially what they're saying is, once we clean up the impoundments and do some of these other things, they will then begin monitoring the groundwater, correct? And then they will tell us what the cost is above the 17.8 million. So,
Dave, does the 17.8 million include any work on where the coal was stored?
Yes.
Oh,
Okay, can you hear me now? So yes, it does include the coal yard. There is 1.7 million out of the 17.8, but that hasn't changed. That was 1.7 when we started, and that we're gonna come in about that. The big increase has largely been the expansion of what they consider the units 1 and 2 impoundment, and the area where ash was used as beneficial fill over the dump.
That's 10 acres, you said?
The coal yard is 10 acres, 9. Coal yard's 9. The
So how
total,
many acres are we talking about that you referred to have to be monitored or cleaned up?
that's a good question. I don't want to rattle that one off the top of my head. I'll get you an answer on that.
It might be good you guys put a memo together or some facts, not 20 pages, but.
I understand.
okay, so what we tried to do here is, again, we still don't know what is and isn't going to happen. All right, so what did we try to do? And because we have to put together a 6-year plan, and we have to determine what we are going to bond and what we are going to use with cash. All right. So when we get to the assumptions that we make in our capital plan, the biggest assumption is the first one is what are you going to build? The second big question is how are you going to pay for it? All right. Now, this gets into item 6 as well, is what can we use to pay for the $17.8 million? All right. So,
could we stay with item 5 for a minute before you get into that?
yeah, I'm trying to blend it together here, but just let me finish here. Okay. So what we're trying to do in this $17.8 million is we are not suggesting this is a budget that you should hang your hat on. What we're trying to do is say, okay, what is kind of the worst case scenario? And if we use all of our cash or most of our cash to pay for that, well, again, I'll show you that when we get in there. All right. It's easier to show you than to actually talk about it. But the assumptions that they made in our UFS 5-year rate study is the same numbers that came from our capital improvement budget. All right. So what they essentially did is they determined what the revenue requirements were for the $17.8 million plus the debt service or the capital plan that we have in place, plus the debt service requirements on that. If we issue $45 million of debt, if we only issue $45 million of debt, we will take that cash down from about $29 million today down to somewhere around $20 million. with the $17.8 million. All right. Now, the minimum cash position is right around that $15 to $16 million range. So that means that with the $17.8 billion and the rates that we've set with the rate reduction plus the cash, we could go up another few $1 million and drain our cash reserves down even further than that $17.8 million and address some other issues that the BLP may or may not have. All right. But what we're trying to do here is saying, okay, if we don't have that cash, then the only thing we can do is bond for it. All right. So, and then the question becomes is what we can and cannot bond for, which is the other elements of what we were talking about. So that's with that, John, before I go on to that, I'll talk.
Eric, this question is for you. If you were able to proceed with the current plan to build that facility on Harbor Island, can you do that before the mitigation issue is resolved?
I mean, that was our first question as well. And we really couldn't answer that until we knew what was under Unit 3. And now we're there, right? We've removed the slab. We did find that ash was used as fill. Our engineering firm came in, told us what we needed to do. We excavated the ash from underneath Unit 3, put a marker down, replaced with clean fill. And both them and we've had our environmental, or I should say yours now, your environmental attorney review that. And they said if we're going to build over the footprint of the existing facility based on what we found, they don't have any reservations with us proceeding with the plan of building on that. The mitigation is going to take, and I think we've been saying this since, well, there was a newspaper article in December of last year where we said the cleanup of this island is going to take many, many years, and it will.
So if I understand what you're saying, then the ponds and the mitigation of the ponds and any future mitigation of where the coal is stored would not slow down the building of a facility as planned.
No, I think where the risk runs in, if it stretches out too far though, and it is a risk that we're starting to be concerned about is, we've got to get some mitigation done because if we do want to use that acreage for some future purpose, we did meet with a battery storage company and Dave is right. There's a potential there. And so if that becomes a greater potential down the road, we want to have a site where we can place that. And so we do want to start seeing some movement on mitigation, but it's a little slow going because we're dealing with two different regulatory agencies with two sets of rules. So there is some parts of the property that we will want to use in the future for potential emerging technologies that we want to get some traction on now.
I think one of the things that we're trying to do as well here is, if you remember, the Unit 3 ponds are the most likely that we'll be able to solve relatively quickly. All right. The coal yard is another area where we're hopeful that we can get a clean bill of health quicker than some of the other areas. The biggest problem right now is that we envision where the most work will probably likely occur and be stretched out the longest is impoundments 1 and 2, the impoundment that we call 1 and 2, right? So that is kind of to the west, or excuse me, to the east of our substation out there. And that is an area where we will likely have to leave undeveloped for some period of time until we work with Eagle and get this, and I think Eric's right, we're years, this isn't going to be months, it's going to be years. So
jump in just for a second? When we say impoundments, we think of circles, right? We think of a depression in the ground, and that's kind of intuitive. And that's what we were told by Eagle in 2019 is when they came out and assessed the site, they said anything that was placed pre-1978, according to their state rule, can remain. Anything that was placed post-1978 has to be removed. Now, that's very consistent with what they're doing at the BC Cobb plant, but there is a difference with the federal rule. And the federal rule was anywhere, how EPA is interpreting their rule, and we had our attorney review this to see if they had legal standing to do it, and it's sketchy, but I don't think it's worth the legal fight to have with EPA. Is anywhere that the power plant slooshed ash to, they're considering an impoundment. So why is that important? Because we have some historical photos from 1968. So this is 53 years ago. There's nothing we can do to change this course. That did show that the power plant slooshed ash into that eastern wetland. Now keep in mind, we just got that determination. EPA just introduced that to us in November of last year. So that's not that old. And in January, we had our attorney review it, and he said, you're probably better off trying to come up with a mitigation strategy than deciding to have a legal fight. So we didn't bring the attorney on to battle the EPA. We just need to know what we need to do from a legal position. But there's nothing this board or staff or management or even the previous generation. I mean, this was done back in the late 60s. So rules came out in 2015. This is applicable. We have to deal with it. Thankfully, when that's happened, we did come to the board and we started the in situ stabilization study because we knew where this could go. And we said, look, give us an analysis of whether we can stabilize this material in place because we have the problem of the old city dump. And we've been saying from day one, if we can kill two birds with one stone, we're going to try. But the rule requires complete removal. So everywhere where they've delineated this impoundment, the area we use sluice ash, late 1960s, has to get removed. And so that's the worst case. That's why we got the number. We put it in the budget. Do we want to spend that or do we think we will? We would prefer to do something more economical, but that's what we're being told we have to do today. So let's move forward with that number and hope we can collectively work on a mitigation strategy that takes more of the whole site into account rather than these narrowly focused areas where ash was sluiced to.
Dave, question for you. Would you please, the only thing that we've got, that ballparks the cost that gets to 48 million is this. Could we get an updated version of this?
Yeah, I would like.
That shows us the current, shows us the current costs and any new ones that need to be added to this list?
That's why I included that actually is all of the current actual costs in our budget in the capital improvement plan, with the exception of $9.8 million being added to the $8 million. Everything else is exactly the same.
So snow melt is exactly $1 million.
Yes.
And tearing down Sims is exactly
5.2 million.
5.2.
Yes.
'Cause I don't think that's what showed in the budget sheet, did it?
Yes. I will show you those exact numbers.
Okay.
In the capital improvement plan.
One other comment for you. You keep using this number as the number that of the total number, the 17 million or the 17 plus million that would have to be financed for generation. I actually, looking at this, doesn't make 17 million seems low because, now hear me out, you have to develop the site and you have to put utilities on the site if you were going to build generation there. So it's more than the cost of the equipment and the building construction. So my number, if I were to add in, I'm putting in all of the site development utilities, it probably would be a portion of it. It's closer to 20 million than 17 million.
Right. So again, the 18.5, we're confusing numbers here with numbers. All right. So the $18.5 million that we refer to as the CHP, all right, is the CHP numbers on that page right there at the bottom of the page is the 4 point, in here.
Yeah, it's 17 point, it's 18.55.
There is no updating. This is the current numbers. That's why I gave them to
It's
you.
18.55, Dave. If you add those two numbers together.
Right, that's the only thing that we changed. Okay, now, so what this, with this 47.95 million here, okay, now add 9.8 million to that, all right? Now, what we're saying is our recommended bond, so this is what we had to have for the rate people to do their rate analysis, which we all said, well, geez, why did you do this? Why did you do this? What we did is we said, okay, we have to tell them what our capital improvement plan is, what our large expense plan is, and how much we want to bond, and what is necessary for use of cash, all right? So all of these numbers went into that UFS rate study last week, so that you saw a couple weeks ago. So these numbers are the numbers. There is no changes here. There hasn't been a change in these numbers really for the last 4 months, with the exception of the $9.8 million just got added.
But my change is to add the cost to prepare the site and provide utilities, which is not included in your 18 plus million.
The site utilities are right here at 2.1 million.
Yeah, add that in. Add it in.
Okay,
You're at 20 million.
Well, we're at actually 27.75. If you add all of the 25.65 plus the 2.1 plus the $1 million up top for snow melt, you're actually at 28.75 million.
So if we're just talking about
28. I'm just using these numbers.
Dave,
I'm not adding anything. I'm not changing anything.
I've got the floor here, please. If you just talk about generation, then we're talking about 21 million bucks, not 17 million. If we were going to build generation, if we were going to bond for generation, that portion of it, it's 21 million. It's not 17 million.
No, it's the 7.1 million. Excuse me, the 4.75 million
Yeah.
and the 13.8 million.
And the site development and utilities.
Well,
You gotta have that.
You can include that as part of the entire building and
Well,
grounds. Yeah,
if you
that's
just
fine.
were gonna build a generation portion of it, you'd have to have site preparation and utilities, correct?
If
If you're gonna build anything out there, you'd have to have it.
what are you asking for?
I'm trying to get to the point of isolating what the total bonding cost would be for the generation portion of this project.
And what we
And you
did,
have to add in site prep
no, you
and
don't.
utilities.
It depends on what you're comparing it to. Now, so what I
Well,
did.
What
is
I'm comparing it to be honest with you, and what I wish you'd provide us is what the projected costs are for 12.5 megawatts of capacity for the next 20 years.
Right, so.
Let's see it.
That's exactly what I did. So for Cone, all right, so Cone is the construction of a new resource, all right? They do not include $2.1 million of site developments in that
But
calculation.
we would have to bond for it.
If we are going to have to redevelop Harbor Island, then we need to bring those assets on. If we don't build those, then we have to buy a
Well,
property somewhere and
Okay,
pay
don't
the
go away,
cost to
don't
develop
go
that
away
property.
from where we are. What I'm talking about is being able, for purposes of identifying the claim that by building this capacity, it's cheaper than buying it for the next 20 years. Let's see that. Let's see those numbers.
I just told you is when they do not include any
Who's they?
land costs.
Who's they? What are you talking about?
When MISO determines the cost of a new unit. They do
I'm
not.
not talking about MISO. I'm talking about us doing the calculation.
I understand that, but you're saying compare it to this.
Yes.
Well, I am comparing it to that, and I have to compare apples to apples. You can't
Well,
compare apples to oranges, John.
You can compare what we anticipate our total bonding cost would be, which means not 17 or 18 million, but what it would, if we were going to build just the generation portion of that, it would have to include the site plan or the site preparation.
I'm
then
not
you tell
arguing
me,
with that. I'm saying,
okay, so we're at 20 or 21 million. What it would cost to bond for that for 20 years compared with what does it cost to buy 12.5 megawatts of capacity for 20 years? And it better be lower, because if
Of
it's
course it will
higher,
be,
then it
because-
isn't a justification for doing it.
well, John, what you're comparing again is apples to oranges, because in that cost,
You're
first of
using-
all, in that cost of capacity, you're not getting a call option and you're not getting land. In this particular calculation, you're getting developed land. So you can't assume that at the end of
We're
20 years of
looking
buying
at-
capacity, you have a $2.1 million site.
We're
You
looking
don't
at-
have that when you, with what you're comparing it to.
What do you mean we don't have it? We have it. It's out there.
When you buy capacity, you do not get a piece of property developed in that.
I'm not saying you do. We're buying the capacity through MMPA.
Okay, what I'm telling you is what we've done, all right? So if you look at the capital,
We want to see the numbers, Dave.
well, the numbers are here. We can give you,
No, we
we can
want to see
give,
the numbers.
so let me give you the calculations in the capital improvement plan when we get there. So this is where we got them from, all right? Now you can add whatever you want, you can subtract whatever you want, you can do whatever you want. I really don't care, John. But this is what, I'm just telling you what we've done. And we have assumed a $45 million debt issuance. We're not
So-
assuming 17, we're not assuming whatever, we're assuming
So the rest
45
of you,
million.
45 and 56, we would be using cash for.
What's
Is
that?
Correct? The difference between what number you're using and the number here, this would be 48 plus 9, 48, about 58 million and 45. The difference between 45 million and 58 million, we would be using cash for.
We're
Our
actually,
cash.
we're actually using about $31 million of cash to finance our entire,
But I mean, the
our
difference
entire,
between those numbers.
yes, those would be cash.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on. If you gentlemen don't
Okay,
agree,
so-
settle it later.
We are only recommending bonding $45 million. Yes. We had to assume, I mean, again, I'm trying to use the same numbers that we used in our cost of service study. Now, we could have bonded less and brought our cash down lower. We could have bonded more and kept our cash up higher. I'm just telling you what UFS included as their necessary rate calculation. So if we bond more, then we will have more cash in the bank. We will then be able to restore more to the customers in an immediate rate increase or decrease. If we bond less and we use more cash, then we will take our cash values below the recommended levels and we will have to raise rates. So it all ties together, all right? It all gets together. So in the ban, this is what we need to understand now is the ban. And John asked some very legitimate questions and we need to address this issue in this year's budget. The bans become due in July, right? We anticipate that we will have somewhere around $14 to $15 million borrowed in July. Now we have gone and asked Huntington Bank to extend the ban for some period of time. That will not come free of charge. They're willing to do it, and what our financial advisors are saying is you don't want to spend that cost. All right? So you don't want to spend the cost that they want to charge us to extend for a short period of time. So we have several different options that we're looking at.
How much is it?
So if we do nothing, right? If we do nothing and we just don't pay off the debt in July, all right? So this was the questions that you asked, John. Then what happens is we pay off whatever that amount is in 4 equal payments every 6 months, starting on July 1st, or excuse me, January 1st. So January 1st, July 1, January 1st, July 1, they will be paid off. Now we can do that, right? That will be at a LIBOR calculation that's in there, which is substantially higher than the 1.65% that we're paying, right?
LIBOR today was 0.28.
Which is not a good deal. Well, I'm just telling you that there's other mechanisms to get cash for less than that. So what our financial advisors are saying is that would not be the recommendation to do that. All right. Now, yes, of course we can do that because that's what the contract says we can do. What PFM is suggesting is that if we were to get an extension at the 1.65%, just allow us to continue to draw on that for another 3 or 4 months, they may recommend doing that. If they are looking at other alternatives rather than to do that. And that might mean use $14 million of cash. I mean, we're not getting 2% interest on our cash right now. So maybe we draw down our $29 million of cash below or to about that minimum level of cash and then bond that amount sometime this fall.
Dave,
Can't even get 1% on your money right now.
I know that, Larry. That's
Dave?
what I'm saying is that's what they're suggesting is that there are other ways to get the money that they are evaluating. But what we will need to do is, and this is what we're fighting, is the short-term rates and the long-term rates, all right? What the number that we used in all of our calculations right now is 2%. That 2% may or may not be there at the end of this year. All right, we will have to bond. There is no doubt we will have to bond. The only way we don't bond is if we raise rates. All right, so we need to issue a bond.
We need to talk about rates too, but anyway.
So we need to issue some money. Now, even if we don't build, we're going to have to get money for some of these remediation costs and the cost of items that we've already paid for. All right, we got to get the money. All right, so there's no way around this. That debt issue, the longer we push it out, the 20-year issue, the longer we push it out, the higher our interest costs are likely to be. All right.
Well, that's sort of a given.
Okay, well, that's what we're dealing with. All right. So what we're dealing with is getting a few extra months to determine what we need to do. All right. The reason we're not going to the bond market in July is because we didn't know how much we were going to bond. Now we're getting closer to being either we bond 45 million and build the project, or we borrow about 20 million and don't do the project, right? That's our choices. So if you want to mess with the exact numbers, we can get down to maybe 18 million. Or whatever, but we're going to have to bond something, because if we don't bond something and pay off those bans and get some money for what we are going to do, we are going to be in problems. All right. So that's why it was so important when we did our rate study that everyone understood the rate calculations. Now, if we don't build the $28 million of buildings and stuff, whether we build it, whether it's 28, 27, 29, it doesn't matter. Of course, we don't have to bond it. That's makes sense. We still have to get the money for the rest of the project, which gets us to our original question that everyone asked last year. All right, John, are we back to where we started here? All right, so the start.
And that question was?
That question is what can we bond? What can we bond?
What items?
What items can we bond? All right, now, the question that I have asked, I'm still waiting for an answer because everybody says, well, it's a hypothetical. The question that I'm asking is, can we bond $17.8 million, fix the site, clean it all up, charge our ratepayers that for the next 20 years, and give the site away? Because that's what people are asking us to do right now. All right? That's what people are asking us to do. Is clean up the site, bond it, and give it away. And then charge our ratepayers that amount of money for the next 20 years. I don't believe that's legal. All right? So now, if anybody wants to argue with me, you know what? You can ask your attorneys, you can do all this kind of stuff, but we're selling electric revenue bonds for an electric revenue project that doesn't have an electric project. All right? I can read the charter just as well as anybody else. And you can't spend electric revenues and electric revenue bonds unless you have an electric revenue project. Now, if we don't want to build the project, okay, that's fine. It's your decisions to make, but then I need to get $18 million from somewhere else. And that's what someone that is telling us that we need to do this needs to tell me, because right now in this budget, I have a $45 million bond issue for an electric revenue project that only includes about $4 million of site remediation costs, right? The rest of it is coming out of cash. If I don't sell the bonds and I take it all cash, I don't have enough cash to pay for the non-electric portions of this project. That is a problem, right? I've waved the red flag since last year at this point in time when we issued the notice of intent. Everybody dismisses me outright. It doesn't make, Dave, we can do it. We can do this. We can do that. Show me how to do it. I'm telling somebody else that they need to tell me how to do it, or we need to look for something else. All right? I am putting together a bond or a budget. I need to know what we're going to include in the budget from a financing perspective. I'm asking our financial advisors. Our financial advisors are putting in the information. We will find a way to finance this, but the big ticket right now is whether we have an electric project or whether we don't have an electric project. And it makes a big difference.
Dave, back to my original question. Can you tell us, we're going back to Huntington Bank here. Huntington Bank is willing to extend the original agreement, but they haven't specified what the interest rate would be?
What they want to do is they want to, for a short, we're talking 3 to 6 months here.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
What they want to do is they want to reissue the bands at a different interest rate. What that means is all of your legal fees associated with hundreds of thousands of dollars of legal fees associated with the original band will have to be redone. The legal cost,
So they can't
fees,
just extend the existing agreement?
the only way that we can extend the existing agreement is under the terms of the existing agreement.
Which would pay the higher rate for the
Yes.
next 2 years?
Yes.
They will not agree to extending the agreement as part of the original agreement and not charge us that higher rate. Is that right?
I think the big ticket is they do not want to extend the existing bans. They want to issue new bans, which will require new issuance
Why would
costs.
you want to go to new ones and have to
We gotta ask them
recover all
that.
these expenses?
We don't.
Okay.
That's my
Well,
point,
then why
Larry.
don't you pay what they want on the 2 point whatever it was interest, which would probably be cheaper than the
Because
other
then we have to
alternatives.
pay it off in 2 years.
Yeah.
And we don't, then we still need to issue long-term debt.
Would they not?
Is it possible we could go to another lending institution
That's,
and get
you go
that
through the
rate?
same process again?
it-
You
See,
get the same
so,
cost.
so here's what we're investigating. Again, we have, all the what ifs are being looked at by professionals, all right? So we don't need to decide that here.
Okay.
But yes, PFM is looking at what the best alternatives is. One of the alternatives is to go to our underwriter, which is Bank of America, and see if they will issue some pay these things off in July and issue us a short-term note until we issue debt with them. All right, that's an alternative, probably a good one, but we haven't talked to them yet. All right, so all of these what-if scenarios, those are all great, but what we're fighting is that we do want to probably issue long-term 20-year bonds sometime in the 3 to 6 month range. This is not something that you want to push off into next year. It's not something that anyone is recommending, all right? So we need to get this decision made. The first decision that we have to make is whether there's an electric project or not, all right? And we need to call that question and decide, because if we don't, and quite frankly, I'm at the point where you vote, all right? Vote. If you don't want to do it, then don't do it. If you want to do it, then do it. But at this point in time, we have to know in the next few months whether or not we are going to build or not build. We've been talking about it for 2 years. It's time to vote. I think most people are in that boat. I think council would like to vote. Let's vote. And
What's the estimate of what's going to happen to bond interest after the first of the year?
I think most people are suggesting that with these $1 trillion, these, and who knows if they're going to pass or not pass, but most people are suggesting that inflation is likely to occur towards the end of this year into next year if we keep spending trillions and trillions of dollars in the federal
What are
government.
they estimating the increase will be?
We can get.
You've shown us the inflation rate is 2.2%.
That was not a bondage. That is not.
I know, Dave, but tell us what they're telling you.
We can do what ifs all night. Let's move on.
I know. So.
Well, I'd like an answer to that question.
You know what? I think what we need to do is get your questions. And again, this is something that I've asked you 2 weeks ago. I'm asking you to do it again tonight. Ask your questions. I will get your answers. I am not the person to suggest what the interest rates are going to be or where we anticipate them to be 3 months, 4 months, 8 months from now. I am not, that is not my expertise. We will ask the appropriate people. But again, I'm telling you, it's a guess. And if you talk to 5 different people in the industry, you're going to have 5 different recommendations and what it is. But what most people are saying is that the interest rates are going to start creeping up if we haven't already experienced them in July. So I think the recommendation to issue our debt in July was based on the fact that our financial advisors had a good feel that interest rates wouldn't change by that point in time. Now we're pushing it back. So we're pushing it back from their recommended time frame to go to the market. I'm assuming that will have some impact, whether it's 1 percentage point or a 0.5 percentage point or 20 basis points. Again, I'm not the right person to ask. If you write your questions down, I will get you answers.
Are these fellows working on bonds or are they working on notes like the ones that are issued by Huntington Bank?
If you remember,
The terminology is notes.
right,
For Huntington Bank.
right. That is not. We are talking about bonds. We are writing
That's all
off
I gotta know.
the bond anticipation notes, the bands with a bond, electric revenue bond.
Okay. What, are they available to come in and give us an education?
PFM would be a great resource. I would suggest that they would be happy to come in or do a Zoom meeting and do a bond issuance 101 course for you. That would be fine. I think what we do need to do is get to the issues at hand for next year's budget, which needs to be approved at your next meeting. And we need to include in that the rates, the revenues, and expected.
We're gonna need a discussion on the rates.
Well, they need to discuss it, but they need to be in place 30 days before the fiscal year starts. That's not something that I determine. It's something that's in the charter and it's a requirement. So if you want to discuss the rates and you can't agree on the recommendation that's provided before you in the budgets are the rates that were recommended by the independent consultants, given the recommendations that I'm trying to get to here tonight so that everyone knows what the assumptions are. If you want to change the assumptions or change the numbers, then we can change or propose changes if that is the desire of the
Well,
board.
just as a practical thing, I'm not so sure you should be changing anything on the rates until we get certain things settled going forward and take up the rates next year. I mean, that's just a general statement, but there are issues in that rate structure that was not covered. For example, you did not cover anything about the municipality, city of Grand Haven. What is that, about $6 million a year? There was no discussion on that.
That's because we can't discuss that.
We can't?
No, there's no
Why?
negotiation on that. That's determined in the charter and
Is that the 5%?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
It's
6
2
and a-
million.
all of
It's
it?
about 2 million. What's that?
The 6 million.
I don't know where you're getting the $6 million.
Well, you can look at your accounting sheet, your dashboard. It says 6.5 million at the city.
No, it does not.
It does not?
No, it's about $1.8 million a year.
How much?
$1.8 million. Again, we got to get there, all right? So, I mean, it would be nice if we can,
Well,
if we
there's
can
still
move
gonna be
through
a
this stuff.
discussion on rates because there's some other issues with them.
Okay, that's fine. So, okay, so the bans are an issue. We need to, so the estimates for the environmental work, the CHP economic benefits, the bans, those are all things that got us to the proposed budget for next year, all right? So in last month's package, you had a proposed budget. We've made a couple changes to those. Lynn is on the phone if we want to ask her questions, but if you would pull up the proposed budget, well, before we're going to go that, if we could put up the four graphs that I showed you. So that one right there. Okay.
Sorry, you were right. I was off one digit.
Okay, so what are the assumptions that we make and what transition are we involved in? Because this is really important for people to start to recognize, all right? So what transition? Okay, so I think this chart is one that you've seen before. It shows you 20 years of history and 5 years of projections, right? What does this chart show? It shows you that we were a generating utility, right? Until 2010, we generated about 120% of the power that we sell, all right? So no questions there. Between 2010 and 2020, we started buying from two sources, both from MPPA, one a renewable resource and one a financial resource, right? So starting in 2010, we started phasing in the renewable purchases in green. And we started phasing in financial purchases in blue, all right? This should become as no surprise to anyone, right? Because this is the exact chart that we showed when we told everyone we were going to shut down Sims. So what is this telling us? So now we are in fiscal year 2021, all right? The red is gone. We are no longer a generating utility. 100% of our budget is for distribution and purchase power. So I think John made the suggestion last month that it only affects 3 line items. No, this strategic plan of the last 5 years, transitioning to the next 5 years, affects every line item in the budget because what we've done is gone from a generating utility to a purchasing utility. And then as we go forward, even if we build stuff, even if we build this small little resource, which happens to be that red line out on the end, even if we build that, the green continues to expand and the blue continues to decrease, right? And it's just really the only decision that this board has to make, except for whether we build that red line, that little red slice there or not, is how much green and how much blue. How much green, how much blue. And that is your power supply question in a one standard line item, right? That's all, that's really all we tell MPPA is how much renewable energy and how quickly do you want to implement that and how quickly you want to decrease the blue. That is the question that you have. And quite frankly, whether or not you build this little red resource slice up there, it has almost no impact on your overall budget. Because what you're doing is replacing a financial product with a financial product. The red line up there is not coming out of the green. It is not coming out of the green. It is coming out of the blue. As you can see, the green continues to expand over the life of this. So the people that are suggesting otherwise are not looking at reality. Next chart, please. There should be 4 in a row. Okay, so the next chart. This shows in numbers the exact numbers that are contained in the chart. All right, so all this is a tabulation of the chart. All right, now look at the top line. The top line is from 2017 to 2025, what our internal generation was. So in fiscal year 2017, the power plant generated 308. And if you go back to the other chart, go down, 2017, you see that we actually generated more power than what we sold. Retail. So we actually sold some back to the marketplace. That was the 308. The amount below the line is the negative 21 million. 21 million kilowatt hours, 21,000 megawatt hours, all right? And then the renewable line going forward from 25,000 up to 89,500. The 89,500 includes 2 solar purchases that I will be taking to you in the next month. All right, so we continue to expand the solar purchases, but that last increment there to go from 85 to 89.5 is 2 solar purchases that you have not yet seen. All right, so but what is interesting is you can see in 2017 we were at 8.2% renewables, the green portion, and in fiscal year 2025 we are looking at 28.3 million, or 28.3%. Now, John said, well, what do we assume is our goal? On that red line that you saw, it goes up 2% per year, every year after 2025. All right? So in 2035, we would be at 38.3%. Is that too high, too slow, too fast? It's what we believe the market will be doing. All right. So what our suggestion is for you, and it's what it is for MPPA, is to not go past the market. So as Michigan, as Consumers Energy, Detroit Edison, everybody are building renewable resources. Some people are saying, let's go to 100% today. Let's exceed the marketplace. Let's go faster than the marketplace. So what's happening to those people? Every year, renewable energy prices go down. So if you rush to the marketplace today and you get to 100%, you can scream and holler and say, yes, 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 yes. You know what's going to happen to you over the next 20 years? As that renewable energy in the marketplace keeps coming through and going down every year, you've just locked yourselves in for the next 20 years at high cost. That's what's happening to people that are buying 100% green today, right? So, right, that's what I'm saying is, like, learn from our mistakes. Don't overbuy from a single resource, i.e. landfill gas. Luckily, that landfill gas will start going away 20 years after we bought it, which is in 2028. All right. So as that landfill gas goes away, we're going to replace the landfill gas with lower price renewable energy and keep up with that 2% per year increase. All right. So that's what's in that plan. That's what's in this plan. That's what's in our strategic plan. That is what's in every cost going forward to this date. Now, does that mean it can't be changed? No, it doesn't. It means that you can make changes. I'm just telling you what we've included for your consideration in this year's budget. All right. So all of these numbers are included in the next 5-year capital improvement plan. All right. So next chart, please. So this is the revenues. These are not rates. These are revenues. These are the revenues associated with your projected budget for fiscal year 2022. All right. Now, what you see is what people said is your rate differential is on average about 1% downward. So why did our rates this year go down more than 1.3%? Because built into this chart are not rates, but revenues. So when you shift from selling a lot of industrial at low cost to selling a lot of residential at higher cost, your average rate goes up and you didn't change your rate at all. You understand how that works, right? When you sell power at low cost to industrial customers and substitute the power that you were selling at low cost at higher cost is what's happening this year. Even though our rates went down, they would have went down even further if we would not have been making that. The revenues would go down even further, the average revenues, if we weren't making that substitution. Next year, we're assuming that it goes back the other direction, some. In other words, we don't have all of these people working from home anymore. We'll have some, but not as many, and we will have more people producing product at our industry. We've made some assumptions this year. So that's what these revenues are assumptions, not only include the rate changes, but they also include our estimates of what the usage patterns are going to change. So those
Dave?
all are in here.
Question. Why does the volume used by a customer change what it costs to supply it?
Okay, that's a good question. So we have a certain amount that we go out and buy. It's the base amount, all right? So if we were to perfectly match, say all of our renewable purchases with the exact volume, which we don't do, then we would know exactly what the costs are and what to include in our budget, right?
Right.
What we do is we buy blocks and we piece those blocks together in conjunction with how we think our customers are going to use it. 5x16 blocks, 24x7 blocks, renewable blocks, all these different choices. And then we go to the unhedged portion. All right. Now the unhedged portion is the cheapest block. It's the cheapest block because it's unhedged. There's no guarantee there. So what we've done, again, and this goes to what our assumptions were if you look at MPPA's actual projections for next year, they assume a certain usage in a 20% unhedged, approximately 15 to 20% unhedged portion. Now, that unhedged portion, if we don't use it, which we don't think we're going to, because their estimates are higher than ours, then we will not be buying that lowest price block. Same thing when a customer makes a decision to not use as much, they aren't accessing that lower priced block as much as other times. So what we need to do is we need to say, okay, what do we have? What do we estimate that unhedged portion is going to be in the short-term market and how much of it we're going to purchase, all right? And there will be some unhedged product, right? So that's what those charts, you remember we spent a bit of time a couple months ago looking at those monthly reports that we get from MPPA and all of the unhedged and hedged and all of the lines that we showed on that chart. We've used those in calculating what we think the which I'll get to. All right, so let's get through this chart first of all. One more, there should be one more chart. All right, so this is one you haven't seen yet. And if it doesn't help, it's an attempt on my behalf to show you in simplistic forms what the rate people are doing, all right? And what how they're calculating the rates and what they're doing. So if you look at the period from 2017 to 2020, all right, which is the lines to the left, all right? That period of time, almost that entire period of time, we had SIMs operating. We had costs associated with operating SIMs, all right? So if you look at the power supply costs and the system operation costs, those were the SIMs cost, right? We had our power system operations were at SIMs, right? We had people in the SIMs plant operating our plant, all right? So we had, if you look at the 57.15 plus the 9.5, that is all of the costs associated with buying power and operating SIMs for 4 years, all right? On a per kilowatt hour basis, or per megawatt hour basis, excuse me. So $126, 126.40 is the amount on that previous chart. It would be 12.64 cents, right? So then you take the administrative and general expenses, the distribution and engineering expenses, the operating expenses, the operating income, the annual debt service, the transfer to the city, and you get all of those things are directly off from your budgets and income statements divided by the number of kilowatt hours, right? So all of those expenses are now itemized on a per megawatt hour basis. The problem in your rate calculation is we don't sell everything on a per kilowatt hour basis. We sell some things on a monthly basis, fixed charge. We sell some things on a demand charge. So this is a very simplistic analysis, totally on average cost per, so the expenses are divided by your cost per megawatt hour, all right? And here is your transfer to the city on average, every megawatt hour has for the last 4 years, or from 2017 through 27 has $6.28 out of the 26.4 that went directly to the city. All right. So, and you can see that as it goes forward. Now, what happens in budget year 2022? All right. In 2022, we now have annual debt service. We're assuming in 2022, we have debt service. So the $2.572 million on the $45 million debt issuance for 20 years is $9.30 per megawatt hour in budget year 2022 on 295,800 megawatt hours. That's $2.572 million per year. All right. If this doesn't help, you try to figure out where your costs are and how they are on a per megawatt hour basis, then throw it away. All right. And if you want to look at the annual debt service, these numbers will jibe directly with your budget. Now, why did I do this? Because look what happens in 2023 and 2024. What's been happening and this is what I'm talking about is it affects every line item in our budget. What we're doing is labor is going down substantially and it impacts every single line item on the budget. And we are going from 73 employees, 72 employees down to less than 50. And if you think, well, that's going to be a long ways out, you know what? What are we at, 49 now? We just broke the 50 barrier. So we're almost there. So those labor costs are getting reallocated, those 22 people of savings, millions of dollars a year. And quite frankly, that is where all of your savings are. They're not in substituting power supply from one area to another area. All of our savings, all of it is coming from reduced labor costs. right? And that's getting spread to every line item. As we make this transfer from generating and being a high employee function to a lower employee function, those line items all change. That's why I showed you this transition that we're making. And we need to reallocate all of those labor costs in different line items. All right? So it doesn't help, but that's what we've done in the budget is we are transferring those, and it's just particularly that $9.50 that used to be at Sims in system operations, that is now being transferred in 2024 to about $9.65. So it's going down. And if you look at the actual power supply costs, they're going up.
You didn't answer my question. Why is it, or maybe it isn't, a company that uses a lot of power one week and not much the next, isn't the cost for the power the same?
No, it's not even
Why
close.
not? Why not?
The cost of power changes on the short-term market every single hour.
Well, who says they're using it?
Their meter does.
No, who's saying who says they're not using what you have negotiated for out into the future?
We split that cost to everyone equally. Everyone bears the same costs. So you're saying, well, why does one customer pay this and one customer pays that?
No, that's not my question. My question is using this volume versus this volume, should the cost per kilowatt hour change?
That is why we do, and this is why Dave Walters doesn't do it, is we have an independent party come in. Now, you can question whether or not that independent party does, but they use standard rate-making principles. I would not recommend changing them, by the way.
I'm not talking about the rates. I'm talking about, let's say, day to day.
Okay,
If
so
a company used a lot of power today and half as much tomorrow, is the cost per kilowatt hour any different?
yes,
Why?
because and one day you might have more solar energy that's under a fixed contract. The next day you might not have that solar. You might have wind that you don't have.
Well,
the
that has
next day.
nothing to do with how much they use.
Right, that has nothing to do with use. But
So
what
my question is, then the volume that is being used is not affecting the price. The volume that I'm using today and the volume I use tomorrow, the cost per kilowatt hour, it isn't how much I'm using, it's where it's coming from, right?
Yeah, and load factor, and the load factor of how you spread the fixed costs. So I don't know what you're saying here.
You can buy energy at different rates.
Right, all kinds of different.
It all comes in, we distribute it to all our customers.
Yeah,
As long as we are making money on the distribution to our customers, why did that rate have to change or not?
because that customer cares what they spend. So what we need to do is,
It does to analyze all these sources of energy that balance it off in the rates that we provide to customers.
and that's why an independent party makes a calculation and says, this is the cost to provide these customers using with these load patterns. And this is the cost for these customers using this load pattern. We don't go in there and say, well, geez, the residential population should pay X. We look at the cost to serve those customers. Now, what's happening in the industry is most people are going, or most utilities are at least beginning to offer time of use rates. In other words, you actually pay what the utility pays in every hour that you purchase. We have not done that, all right? But if you look at Consumers Energy, Detroit Edison, we do need, it doesn't have to do with covering or not covering. It has to do with who pays, what portion. And and some people do it on a time of day rate. In other words, every hour they look at the LMP price in every hour and they charge their customers in comparison to that. So again, what we've done, again, you can knock these, Larry, but I'm just telling you what we do, and what we have done is agreed 5 years ago that me, Rob, Erik, yourselves would not be making cost of service decisions. We would hire an independent party to come in and do that for us. Now, you can question whether or not they know what they're doing or not know what they're doing. But you know what? I would be very, very careful with what you're doing, because if you go in and now say, well, I don't like this charge for that charge. Well, you know what's going to happen? You then, as a board, take money, because we're a nonprofit, all right? You take money from one customer and charge it to another customer. That's what you're doing by changing rates, all right? Well,
So
what we wanted,
why aren't we using the same rate for everybody then?
because the costs are not the same for everyone. John,
I'm talking about the cost of energy, not
it is not the same for
not the
everyone.
cost of service. I'm talking about the cost of energy.
It is not the same for everyone, because everyone does not use the power in the same fashion. It's that simple. So what we do is we look at customers that use the power in a certain fashion, and we charge them consistent with our cost of service. That's why you spent the money to have somebody come in and do that. Now, if you don't like the way they did it or whatever else, you know, we came in, we beat them up pretty bad last month. Okay, that's great. But you know what? They do this for utilities around the country. They determine their cost of service and they make independent rate recommendations.
I'm
Now,
not talking about the cost of service component. I'm talking about the energy component.
it is
Why aren't we charging
the
the same
energy
for everybody?
component is a cost of service.
Well, that's not how they defined it.
Yes, it is. They determine.
Take a look at their chart.
They determine their cost to serve. Now, so again, let's go on to the actual budget presentation if I could.
Yeah, we're getting way off track because
Okay, so
I
we're
got-
here for the budget.
But-
If you want to change any of the things you're talking about, that will be at a different time.
okay, so if we could put up our budget.
Well, excuse me, Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
but
yeah,
the recommendation of the people in the cost of service study has been incorporated in the budget. I've got major problems with it. So if you don't want to talk about it now, fine. Just know that I'm opposed to using those recommendations.
Fine, I want us to do the budget tonight. As I said, all these other issues can come back to the board. We can discuss them, but not anymore tonight.
Okay,
What's the $6 million?
okay, that is charges to the municipality, not transfers. It's their bill. It's their bill. Water pumping, wastewater services, city hall, and the townships, and Ferrisburg, and whatever else, what's classified as a municipal rate. It's primarily but primarily what's in there is water pumping and wastewater treatment is primary. Right, we did their calculation and we made the recommendation for their rates. John, I'm not pushing anybody to do anything. We need to have the rates approved by May 31st. If however you guys want to do it is fine with me. I'm not pushing anybody. We did an independent rate study. We have the rate recommendations before you. If the board would like to make changes to it, then I would suggest that you make the changes as quickly as you can, because our recommendation is to use the independent rate study that was conducted on your behalf.
Now, I'll tell you what, I don't know what Justin's talking about, but I am not increasing the senior base rate 69%. I'm gonna tell you that.
Okay. First of all,
And the
first,
seniors are all using 600.
Make sure you use your lights.
Use your.
I don't want to talk, the chairman doesn't want us to discuss it anymore, but
But
Dave, you are pressing
what you
us.
just suggested is wrong, by the way. The credit for the senior citizen credit went
I
up
know, but
from $3.50 to $4. That is the discount that we provide senior citizens off the normal rate. It went up. It didn't go down, it went up. It went
went
from
up
$3.
$4.50 a month. That's what it
No,
went
the
up.
charges for all residential customers went up $5.
I'm talking about the
discount,
seniors.
the discount for the senior citizens went up.
All
Okay,
these other issues, at the end of this meeting, decide when you want to have a meeting. All the issues that you feel have not been covered or you're not happy with, we will set a time to do it. But we got to get through this budget, and we keep going off on tangents. Let's
I agree.
stick with it.
okay, so if you, first of all, let's look at residential rates. First line item. The residential rates are unchanged in the budget, in the revenues per kilowatt hour. The revenues collected from residential customers is unchanged.
What it is.
Unchanged.
I've got a current and then next year recommended by the COS people.
Right,
Is
so-
the next year for the budget, is the rate going to be 0.11439?
Yes.
So it is changed from now.
I just said, the revenues collected
I'm not talking
from
about revenues. I'm
from
talking about the rate.
residential customers is unchanged per kilowatt hour. Now, the rate changed based on the recommendations of the independent rate consultant. If you don't like what they said, okay, that's fine. I'm not suggesting that we can't modify it. I'm just telling you what's included in the budget. Now, if you make them the same, it will change zero in the budget. The revenues will change zero because the revenues will be the same. It will just transfer from some residential customers to other residential customers. If we leave them exactly the same way, it will not change the revenues in the budget.
Well, that may be.
You mean leave them the way they are right now?
If you leave them the exact way they are right now, you will not change the revenues in the budget.
That could very well be, but it doesn't affect. I said, I may agree with you that it won't change the revenues, but it does impact the category of seniors.
I understand that.
Okay, and they're also the ones that are probably never go over 600 kilowatts. So they're paying the plus, the increase, and those that go beyond the 600 get the decreases.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, okay.
I'm not arguing with you.
But the seniors, most of the seniors are less than 600.
So the question you needed to ask, and I'm sure I know the answer is, are the senior citizens, if we keep the rates the exact fashion that they are right now, are they paying the cost to serve? And the answer is no. That's why they made the changes in the rates that they changed. Now, if you don't want to make those changes, that's fine, but recognize that then somebody else is subsidizing those customers.
Well, I'll go back and I'll explain it this way. I'm not inclined to raise the seniors' rates.
That's fine.
They were giving some preference over the years.
And we're
And
giving
we
them,
continue to do it up until this change.
no, we are actually giving them more of a preference this year.
Well, how can you say that when the base rate goes up to $11 from?
Because the credit went from $3.50, what they subtract off the normal rate went from $3.50 to $4. So we're subtracting more off the standard rate than we did last year. So there is more of a subsidy going on than there was last year.
Dave,
That's the reality.
I want to, the reality of it is, and I'll use where I live as an example. We have 89 units there, and for last year, my average usage of electricity from the BOP, my average per month was 313 kilowatts. And that's, I think, pretty much in line. I'm sure it's in line with everyone else that lives there. And all of these people, because I've worked through the numbers, are going to pay more because they're below that magic 600 or 599, whichever one. And the point is, what I'm trying to tell you is that if we adopt what is recommended, everybody where I live is going to pay more for their electricity next year. And I'm not in favor of that.
And that's fine. That's why you're sitting on the board. I am just
But I'm
telling,
also going to ask you, how many residents of the, what is the number? 12 or 13,000, I don't have the number right in front of me.
12,907.
Okay, how many of them are using 600 or more kilowatts a month? The residential group.
the average,
No, not the average.
just let me finish. The average was 663. That means for every customer that used less than 663, there was an equivalent customer that used more than 663. Now, am I suggesting that senior citizens typically use less power than someone else? Yes. I don't.
So why would they be penalized?
They're not being
Yes,
penalized.
they are. They're going to pay more. You know what it came
They're
out for me? It came out for me that it's going to cost me 5.5% more.
I understand that. And that's the chart that you showed. Now, I am not going to get into deciding and picking winners and losers in the rate setting. Now, if you guys want to do that, that's your choice, all right? That is your parameters to do that. My
Not picking winners
chart,
or losers, it's the way he evaluated the rates.
he looked at the cost to
Yeah.
serve, and he determined the cost to serve and applied those costs to those customers. Now, what you're saying is you don't want those customers to pay that cost, the cost to serve. That's fine. That's your ability as a board member to make that determination. All UFS said this is the cost to serve, and we normally charge customers rates consistent with their cost to serve. Now, if you want to have one customer subsidize another customer, that is your choice.
Yeah, well, I don't think that's subsidizing.
Actually, what's recommended here, what it looks like to me is there's an increase for citizens and senior citizens and no increase for the largest customer. Looks like we're subsidizing them in this case.
If you even give a
if you look-
3.26 discount if they take 1,100 kilowatts.
If you looked at the cost to serve and the fixed cost at $15 a month, the $15 a month is not-
You get no support.
is if you looked at the cost of service study in the residential rate category, everyone should pay $17. What is the amount?
Tell you what, we were doing pretty good when Annette was doing it, and she didn't use these hometown connections.
I just don't want to hear, I don't hear coming from our group that, that we are actually reducing what it's going to pay, what it's going to cost them. Because in the case of the senior citizens, at least half, and I'll bet it's more than half, are going to pay more.
Okay, so if you look at page 10 of the section 5 distribution rates, $17.8. This includes no energy, zero energy, zero. That means our cost to provide service to every residential customer, the meter, the reading, the administrative costs, cutting the bill, all of the fixed costs with no energy at all, is $17.8 per residential customer. What UFS said is they're recommending that this charge that was $10 and $6.50 for senior citizens goes to $15 and $11 for senior citizens. That means that the normal customer is transferring $2.08 from the fixed charges to the variable costs. The senior citizens are not being charged $5.08 of their fixed cost before they use any power whatsoever. Zero power. It doesn't matter if they use
I'm
300,
telling you,
600,
I'm
800.
telling you, we're gonna pay more.
Let me finish. This is what I'm telling you the study says. Now, you can disagree with it all you want, John, but the
Do you
cost,
disagree that anybody under 600 kilowatt hours is gonna pay more? You disagree with that?
no, I don't.
Well, guess how many is that
I am
in that
telling
group?
I am telling you that the senior citizen that pays $11 for their fixed costs, somebody else on the system is picking up $6.08. Now, whether you think that's fair, unfair, whatever, I'm telling you that is what's happening. It is not, we aren't charging senior citizens more, less, whatever. Their costs are $17.08, just like everyone else, before they use any power. And
Just
what we're saying is we're going to charge the average residential customer $15, and we're going to charge the senior citizens $11. So yes, is that an increase over $6.50? Yes, it is. It's a big increase. The problem is that they weren't paying their fixed costs, just like everyone else on the system wasn't paying their fixed costs. So what they did is they lowered the energy cost closer to the actual costs, and they upped the fixed charge, not to fully recover it. It's not fully recovering the cost. In the case of the senior citizen, they are not recovering $6.08. So no, we are not fully recovering the charge to senior citizens. We are not recovering $6.08 of the fixed cost, and we are charging that cost along with the $2 for fixed costs on everyone else and in the energy rate. In other words, we've escalated the energy price.
I understand the process that was used, but just don't in the future be telling the public, that we actually have reduced your costs, because for a good many of the seniors, at least, a good many of the residents, that is not true. If you don't use 600 kilowatt hours per month, that is not true. And by the way, Dave, going back and looking at the annual numbers for the last 3 years, the average usage per month of kilowatt hours per customers is below 600. So we got a lot of people who are going to experience an increase.
Okay, so I don't know what the board wants me to do with this. I first of all, I did not say anything. I did not say one thing, right? This is the rate recommendations that you paid to have someone do.
I guess two of us are telling you we don't want to do that.
Okay, well then I need to know if the
You
other,
guys can decide.
if the other three want to use.
It's going to be a big campaign thing for November.
Okay.
I'll tell you that.
I don't, you know what?
I'm taking it out to the public.
Larry, again, I am not here to either charge or not charge. I'm
This is
here to,
absolutely ridiculous.
okay, so can we finish the rest of the budget?
Yeah,
Right?
my only comment is if this board is not happy with it, then for goodness sakes, call a meeting and resolve it. Go ahead.
I don't know what I guess I really don't know what I'm supposed to do. I am here, I've done the rate study. I'm getting criticized for the rate study that I didn't do. I've got it done in the time frame that I was told to do it in. Now, you guys need to act. So if you don't like what they recommended that they do, then tell me what you want me to do, but it needs to be done. Any rate changes need to be in place by May 31st. Don't blame anybody. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm not saying, geez, it sure is nice. I didn't do one thing other than bring you a rate consultant's recommendation as you asked me to do.
You
Now, if
did
you want-
do something. You have used their information to construct this budget, and that's in writing.
And-
Yes, you did do something.
And that's exactly what your last 5-year strategic plan and this year's strategic plan calls for you to do, is do a rate study, determine the rates, and then set a rate plan. I have set a rate plan consistent with the recommendations of UFS. If you would like to change them, I would like, I mean, you say, well, that's a campaign thing. What you're actually doing is what you would do then is you would transfer costs from one customer to another customer.
That's what we've done in the past year.
That's fine.
That's right.
So somebody is going to be on the receiving end of that, and somebody's going to be on.
I guess John and I are telling you guys that if you want support on the budget and you want support on the rates, you're gonna have to change the seniors. Is that right, John?
They have to change
Residential. All right.
residential. It probably would be better just to leave it the same this year in Ashland,
I
so
thought
need more time.
it's poor timing. I don't think we should do anything this year. I think we should.
Well,
wait 1
we're
year.
not going to do anything tonight. We're trying to get the
This
information.
is what
to you.
happens when you
Okay.
run down the road. I get all kinds of.
We're not
conflict.
going to approve it tonight.
All right, so on the commercial industrial customers, all right? Actually, these
What do
are
you want
the,
to tell us about this thing here?
well, I have to first get to the budget, then I'll get through that, all right?
All right.
On the commercial industrial customers, we did include the budget recommendations, which does contain substantial rate decreases for commercial industrial customers. If we don't want to decrease those commercial industrial customers, you know what? That's your decision as well. So again, we've included the rate recommendations in the rate study. Now, why did they recommend rate reductions? Because as in the residential population, our costs were consistent with the cost to serve. So we didn't change them. We modified them, but we didn't change them as far as total revenues. On the industrial and commercial side, our rates were above the recommended status quo of cost to serve. So they made rate recommendations to bring those customers in line with their cost to serve. Now, again, I'm not making a position one way or another or suggesting right, wrong, or otherwise. I'm just telling you what's happened. We are required to do this. This is the same thing that the Public Service Commission does for Consumers Energy and Detroit Edison. The rate making philosophies are exactly the same as the Public Service Commission utilizes. So if you want to change them to be something other than what every other utility does in their recommendations, that's your prerogative. You're the board. All I did was put in what the rate recommendations were. So that's what we've done for the commercial industrial customers. What actual change is that in the total revenues? If you look at the forecasted revenues for 2020 and 2021, it's $36 million. In the rate recommendations for 2021, 2022, it's actually up $150,000 in revenues. Now, why is it up $150,000 if we reduced rates? It's because we have a larger volume. We're assuming a higher volume next year than this year because we were down this year because of COVID. So we anticipate that some of those sales will come back. Now, I think we had this discussion last year. And I think the two of you said, well, geez, how can you make those choices? Well, look at exactly where our revenues are based on those recommendations that I made last year. The budgeted total charges for services last year on an estimated sales volume, 35,330,000. I don't think we can be much closer than 35,308,300. So again, yes, we have to make estimates of what we think people are going to use in their volumes. Do I anticipate that residential use per customer will go down next year? Yes, I think that's reasonable. And we have tried to estimate what we think that is, because this year it was way up. We did pretty well on estimating what that was, but we did not do as well in the industrial side of things. So if you look at that average, revenues or our budgeted revenues as compared to our forecasted revenues, they're dead nuts right on for overall, but they aren't dead nuts right on for the distribution between residential and commercial industrial, because they were quite a bit different than what we've historically had. All right. So we have assumed in next year's budget that we go back more, not completely, but more towards our historical pattern per customer. Now, if you want to change that, that's fine. Then you guys can do whatever we want. But if you look at our budget to forecast to next year's budget, this is very much a status quo budget on the revenue side. On the expense side, if you look at 2018-19, our expenses were 28,354,000. Last year, they were 29,302,000. This year, the forecast is 25,244,000, and then the next year's budget is 26,965,000. Almost all of that change has to do with labor and expenses. Almost all of it. So the rest of it, we had fixed costs at Sims. We don't have any more, but most of those changes in all of those various line items, the primary difference between year to year to year is the amount of people that we have and what we pay them, right? So that is the budget. The assumptions are on the checklist that you see on the attached page. If they're all consistent with the assumptions that we've made over the last 5 years that I've been here, I don't think we have made significant changes. And quite frankly, I think the revenue reductions that we've had over the last 10 years, I can break them down by rate classes, and you will see substantial reductions per kilowatt hour in every rate class that we provide service to. All right. So the suggestion that, geez, it used to be good in the good old days is kind of a little ridiculous when you start looking at the overall rate changes that we've made, and quite frankly, substantial rate reductions over the last 5 years in all rate categories. So
5-year plan.
it's a 5-year plan that was carried out exactly how it was set up 5 years ago. So now if you can go to the capital improvement plan, I think we might not have. Okay, yeah, so you can just stay on that one. Okay, so you have two, one's more simple than the other ones. One's, what's that?
They're different.
Well, let me explain.
Which one should we be using?
So if you look at the one with less columns, the less columns only contain the same columns in the other sheet. So they are completely exactly identical in those columns. Now, there's more columns in one than the other because what we did is put last year's capital budget, so you can compare year to year what was approved last year to what was approved this year. But what you need to approve this year is the capital improvement plan that only contains this year's capital improvement plan. All right, it's not that hard. I think you guys can figure this one out. It's pretty easy. So what I put up here is the 5-year capital improvement plan that's being proposed. Now, I've told you that the primary difference in these two plans is that we have taken out what we called capital expenses last year. We took these out and expensed them. All right, particularly items that could not be capitalized. In other words, the demolition and the site remediation, we included those costs last year as a quote, capital improvement. This year, they are removed because the auditors have specifically said you need to expense those in the year in which they are actually incurred, and you need to report those as a non-operating income. So in the budget, you will see, go back to the budget, you will see on the bottom, you will see non-operating expenses to the tune of millions of dollars. Those millions of dollars are demolition costs and site remediation costs primarily. All right. Now, what's going to happen is those costs are going to escalate. Now, what we've had put out there is somebody has suggested that our operating income has gone up $4 million in 1 year. That's what's out there. Now, yes, that's true if you don't include your non-operating expenses. But you have to include your non-operating expenses. That's cash out the door. So the reason why there was a dip and went back up is because your non-operating expenses are not consistent, nor would I expect them to be consistent, given the fact that demolition all occurred in fiscal year 2020 and fiscal year 2021, primarily in fiscal year 2021, right? Same thing with site remediation costs. We have just started those costs. Now, what the auditors required us to do with some of the cost is they required us to put some of the cost and book them last year. So we booked them as a liability on the balance sheet last year, even though they were not expensed, because we knew they were coming down the pike. All right. So you need to know and understand how the non-operating expenses are being booked on the balance sheet and the income statement. If you don't, then please don't say anything out there, because there's all kinds of stuff that's being said out there that is absolutely wrong. And one of the things that people are saying is we're building cash. That is nonsense. We are not building cash. We are borrowing money. We have borrowed $12 million.
Yeah, but we got to have cash, greater cash than what we've ever had before.
I understand that. The
Okay.
reason, the reason we have cash is because we haven't used the cash to pay these expenses. Right? Now, you guys are going to have to make that call fairly quickly, right? You guys will have to make that call how much you are going to have to expense, because I need to expense it, right? In the year that it occurs. So I will expense it. I will bond some of it. I will take cash out, but we do not have this. The only reason why we have $29 million in the bank is that we borrowed $12 million. Else we would have $17 million in the bank.
So what can be expensed?
What's that?
So what can be expensed that we can pay for cash?
Well, if we take this
How much money?
$12 million that we borrowed
Yeah,
and we pay it off,
we can pay it all off
we can pay it all off.
and you can expense it out.
Well, some of it would be capitalized and some of it will be expensed.
How much?
Well, it's the demolition would be expensed, the site remediation would be expensed, the substation, the AMI, those items that are capitalized, they would be capitalized and depreciated over their life.
Okay, so the AMI and the substation would be capitalized.
But the cash is out.
I understand.
Once you pay the cash, it's gone.
Yeah, I
Now,
understand.
the minimum cash level of a utility of our operations, and this was the other thing that was in the rate study, is about $16 million.
I understand that, but you have to understand that before you came here, our reserve level was zero.
That's not true at all. The highest amount,
Unrestricted, excuse me.
the highest amount of cash that this utility has had was in 2006 and 2007, when your sales
How about 2014?
Well, they started, that's what I'm saying. As you started going down that path,
Yeah, how low did it get? We borrowed money. We bonded money because we were cash poor.
I don't think you borrowed.
Yes, we did.
Well, we extended our current bonds before we paid them off.
We borrowed $1.5 million on bonds because we had cash flow.
I just said we did. We had,
Could I ask,
we had a bond issue and we added it to our existing bond.
could I ask a question?
Renee, you
Dave?
were here. You know Baird came in.
Uh-oh.
It doesn't matter, Larry.
Baird
Hey.
did the project.
Question for you. Let's get back on here. The, on the budget sheet, the other, the forecast, the column that says forecast 22221, the non-operating income down at the bottom is, 4,860,000 and change. Why can't I find that under expense information over here on, fiscal year 21 projection?
Okay,
I got 4,860,000 there and on the colored one, we've got 6,000,003.
Okay, so,
Why aren't they the same?
so what, again, I didn't put this together, all right? So what are we talking about here? Is that,
I'm just trying to get them to match up. I mean.
okay, so if you look
told
at,
us the non-operating
if you
income.
look at
is expense
the,
stuff.
I understand. If you look at the fiscal year 2021 budget, all right?
Right.
And you look down that first column, there's a red column that says demolition of Sims, see below, and Harbor Island mitigation, see
Yeah.
below.
Yeah, I
So
see
you add
it.
those two together and you get
6,000,003.
3.7 and 2.5. And you look down below, 3.7, 2.5, exactly the same.
Yeah, that's 6,000,002.
Okay, that's what you asked.
But where is it on this one? Look, this one, down at the bottom.
This
I thought you told us the
this is an
non-operating
income,
income,
this is an income statement,
non-operating income.
right? So if
Down
you
at
look
the
down,
bottom.
if you look down here, the actual non-operating income is.
Dave,
Yes,
some of it was, the auditors required us to record a liability, so some of it was expensed the year before.
So,
so if you look.
okay,
if you
So it's
look at-
not apples to apples because some of it was expensed in the prior years.
thank you. Thank you for that. Okay,
I
got it.
think I said the exact same thing about 10 minutes ago, so.
No.
Okay, hold on.
So, again, I think we've made the changes, we've incorporated, the biggest thing is that we've done in the difference is if you look at the columns that have the changes and you go down to the bottom, if you look, most of the expenses were included in the 2021 budget. And then in the 2022, 2023, and 2024 budget, we changed those amounts because there was only 400,000 in the demolition for 2022 and 3 million in Harbor Island mitigation, and then there wasn't anything else the rest of the year. So we have added, that's where we added this 9-point-some million dollars into the capital improvement plan so that we could plan where that expense was coming from, all right? So this, if you look at it, now if you look at this total budget and you forget 2021 because that's done, and you look at the 5-year projections, we got 46.1745 million in those columns in capital improvements, 46.1745. And
Where is that number?
you just add up the blue,
Oh,
right? You add up the bottom columns, all those, if I'm doing my math right, it's 46.1745. Right? And then you add up the other columns from 2022 through 24, there's only 3 years, there's nothing in 2025 and 2026, all right? This is what we told you earlier. We anticipate that cleanup efforts will go on Harbor Island beyond 2024, right? But there's nothing there,
yeah.
right? So that's why having cash go down to,
You do on the bottom.
what's that?
Go ahead.
There is nothing in 2025 and 2026 for expense items.
No, but on 24, you got 5,600.
Right, that's what I'm saying is we included for the next 3 years, $16.6 million. All right, that's the 17.8 minus what we've already spent.
Yeah, check.
All right, so that's 16.6 million in the next 3 years. Now, we did not, this is going back 2 hours ago now, we did not include anything for 2025 and 2026, even though we know that the island will not be cleaned up in fiscal year 2024. All right, so all of this stuff, the rate changes, all the recommendations, everything that we proposed was to get us to 2024. If you remember, the rate recommendations were to get you through to fiscal year 2024. And then come back in and do an update of these numbers. That's why UFS was recommending a 2-year, not a 5-year, a 2-year rate plan for 2 years with zero cost, power cost adjustment. Now, why is that significant? That means you are including zero fluctuation in your power supply costs for the next 2 years. Now, what happens if the power supply costs go up higher? Your unhedged portion goes up higher. You will not recover that cost because your PCA is zero. When your PCA is not zero, which it has been zero this entire year, it is anticipated to be zero this coming year, and it's anticipated to be zero the following year. So the rate adjustments, that makes the rate adjustments that you make that much more certain. You better do what it better happen what you say is going to happen, because if it doesn't, there is no way but to go back and revise the rates, because the PCA will not pick up these higher cost power supply dollars that normally are passed on. And if you might add, if you looked at your PCA calculations between 2005 and 2015, without a rate change, your rates were going up 6.5% per year.
Rates for what?
They were going up 6.5% per year for 10 years because all of those rate adjustments were passed on in your PCA. You didn't adjust the rates, that's true. You passed it all on in your PCA. For the next 2 years and for the past year, we are suggesting to you that the PCA is zero. In other words, you as a board are taking all of the risk, 100% of the risk associated with increased power supply costs. And they will not be passed on to customers until you change the rates.
When you say PCA, what are you talking about?
Built into your rates,
The what?
built into your rates is a power cost adjustment.
Okay.
All right. Now, what does that mean? That means every single month, we calculate what the cost of power was for the last 12 rolling months. And then we adjust the next month based on that 12-month rolling average. Now, when you don't adjust the rates and your primary component is power cost adjustments, which it was in that period that I'm talking about, what happened is you didn't change the rates, you didn't change the base rates at all. All you did was pass on your higher coal costs and your higher operating costs, variable costs at Sims without a rate change. Now, what we're suggesting here is that because we're in this transition period and power supply costs are going like this, we are suggesting that you leave them the same. And then what UFS said is do the recommendations that we told you to do, and then look at your rates in 2 years. That was their rate recommendation. What your goal in your strategic plan is for a 5-year rate plan. Reduce the rates and keep them stable for 5 years. It's highly unlikely, unless all of this stuff happens exactly the way we're proposing here, that we won't have to make some sort of rate adjustment in 2 years. We're hopeful that it's a rate reduction and that we've overestimated these costs. But I can almost assure you that in 2 years, you will be adjusting rates again. And that rate adjustment will primarily be to your base rates, not your energy rates. Because all of these costs, the uncertainty is not in a variable energy rate cost. It is based on fixed cost associated with remediating SIMs, building facilities, doing those types of things, which quite frankly are in your fixed portion of your rate category. That's why it's so important to keep those fixed costs consistent with your actual costs. Particularly when you don't have a PCA, by the way. So, so again, I might add that if you're going to keep and make haphazard adjustments in rates, you may want to keep the PCA and calculate.
Well, you could say they're haphazard, but we've had that sensitivity since I've been on this board,
It's fine.
okay?
I'm not saying that it's right, wrong,
And
or
I'm not
otherwise.
changing my mind. And I'm not.
Larry,
changing
I'm
my
not saying
mind.
it's right, wrong, or otherwise. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that this board has the responsibility to cover the charges that are necessary to operate.
Right.
And if you don't recover them in one way, you need to recover them in a different way. That's all I'm saying.
Let's move on.
So with that, I think that is the budget presentation. Again, I think Pat, Lynn has done, Lynn and the supervisors have done 90% of this work. I get the credit and the blame, I guess, but the work of this budget has primarily been done by UFS in conjunction with Lynn and the supervisors, the department heads.
Very good.
Yeah, we did a good job.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot of work.
I know it is.
It's a lot of work.
So-
There's no question about this.
So what we do need to do is, one of the things that's included in the budget is primarily for the union environment is an extension of their contract. I understand. There is an extension in their contract. We would like to go into closed session and discuss that proposal with you so that we can then either verify or not verify that particular component that's included in the rates, in the charges, so that we can.
You know, the one, this one? There was a sheet with a motion on it to go into closed session. Oh. Well, let's just have a motion and we'll.
I move to go into closed session.
Second,
You need to have a reason.
Huh? The reason,
You need to specify the
because
reason.
we were told to.
That's the whole reason. For the purpose of. Hold on, microphone. I've been doing pretty good that. I move to go into a closed session pursuant to Section 8C of the Open Meetings Act for the purpose of discussing strategy and negotiation sessions connected with the negotiation of a collective bargaining agreement. That was moved by John, supported by Larry.
So what we're going to be doing is going into closed session. We will be reconvening into open session, but we're not going to be taking any action after this call except to adjourn, all right? So I just want, I think, yeah, we're not going to be doing any kind of action. So we're not proposing, we're at a work session, so we're just going to update you on what's going on. So I'm saying this because if those people would like to wait around and hear you adjourn that are on the call, that's fine, they can do that. But all we're doing is we're going to be shutting them off here, going into closed session, then coming back out of closed session and adjourning. All right. So I want to make sure that that's clear with everybody so that we're not hiding anything from the public. There is no intention of doing anything else. And that's all we're doing.
you're just trying to be polite.
No, I'm not. It's kind of a legal thing that I'm sure Renee is pretty. Go to closed session.
Oh, I thought that. Roll call vote.
Director Crum,
Yes.
Director Keefe,
Yeah.
Director Nasser,
Yes.
Director Witherell,
Yes.
Chairperson Smant.
Yes. I just want to say, John, I read Robert's rules this afternoon on closed session.
All right.
And we're going to have to change a few items in how we handle it.
No. Really?
You have to have 2/3 to close, and we don't have 2/3 if it's a 3-2.
Okay, Todd, we're gonna have to have you call, Rob's gonna call you on the cell phone. Other than that, we're going to close this meeting on Zoom.
Okay, sounds good.
I said to close session.